Hey, what's up, everybody? I trust you guys are well. I'm here to introduce quickly to you episode number 20 of the Rooster podcast. Was able to connect and have a really beautiful conversation with a friend, Jonathan McCormick. He is an artist. He has a blog that I'm going to share in the description here, as long as a way to connect with him for artwork. He is a wonderful human being. We share a lot of interests in philosophy and psychoanalysis and orthodoxy. He has a very deep kind of participatory knowing of orthodoxy and these different topics. And we had just a really stimulating, wonderfully beautiful conversation. And he actually just did this piece of artwork for me here. See how talented he is. And we were talking about this, and the front that you see there is a monkified version of me, flanked on either side by Saint Demetrios, Ios Demetrios, who is my patron saint and the patron saint of Thessaloniki. And on the other side is Archangel Michael defeating the dragon. And in the background, you see Thessaloniki there, the White Tower of Thessaloniki, which is where I'm from in Greece. A really wonderfully talented artist. You can get him to do some artwork for you. He's very reasonably priced, quick turnaround time. So check out his stuff below in the description, and check out our discussion and our conversation. It really went into many different areas, but the thread that kind of weaved everything together was that God is love, and how we can understand that, articulate that, and really live it was kind of the exclamation point on that. So wonderful conversation. I'm very appreciative of his time and his energy. I'm sure you guys will as well. And check him out, guys. So without further ado, I give to you guys episode number 20, Jonathan McCormick. God bless. All right, welcome everyone to, this is actually episode number 20 of the Rooster's Crow podcast. And I am very excited to have my friend here, Mr. Jonathan McCormick. Jonathan, how are you?
Good. Thanks for having me, brother.
Yeah, man, it's nice to finally get to talk with you face to face. And this is the first time we've ever talked face to face. We literally just met, 5-10 minutes ago via Zoom here. So nice to meet you that way.
Yeah, nice to meet you, brother.
Yeah, but I've been following you, or we've been Facebook friends probably through the Symbolic World group for probably the last couple of years here and there. And I got to say that you're very insightful, and it seems like a wide array of knowledge, both kind of secular and spiritual. So I kind of gravitate to your perspective a lot.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I mean, that's the thing. When you're in a spiritual tradition, so like a church, anything, it's hard to say how that looks like from the outside. You know what I mean? So, a lot of times, just looking at things from a secular perspective or even from a different spiritual tradition, you don't have to buy into it, but it does kind of give you like an overview of things, and it can really widen things. So, I try not to be, so tribalistic in my thinking, So, yeah.
So are you Orthodox?
Yeah, I'm Eastern Orthodox. Yeah, I've been Orthodox for about 15 years now.
15 years, okay. Wow.
It's been a journey. I mean, I've been through a couple different things, Buddhism and a million other things. But.
Yeah. So I get me too, actually, and a lot of people probably for these reasons that I've been talking to kind of had kind of these similar resonances in our past. So where are you from originally, and kind of what was it like in terms of your religious upbringing with your folks?
Well, I'm from New York, and my upbringing was nominally Catholic. I went to a Catholic school. My parents didn't take it very seriously. I have to say, all the teachers and the priests even really didn't seem to take it very seriously. And, one of the reasons I kind of completely left the church and Catholicism and Christianity, because first of all, there's no gravitas to it. These people did not seem serious, I mean, if you go to another tradition, say Buddhism, some of these people, they live it, they make sacrifices for it. And you can see this in their lives, and they have a spiritual blueprint, and so that was very attractive to me. I saw nothing in Christianity. It seemed like an utter joke to me. And so I went to Zen Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism. I mean, I've studied everything from Madame Blavatsky and Theosophy all the way up to Shintoism, and I was always looking for something. The truth is, though, those other religions, they don't have a personal aspect, and a lot of times they don't have the type of worship that I was looking for too. So it was a long road, but growing up, I went through couple different phases. You know, a lot of people do, and I actually
Yeah.
think it's a good thing. You know,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
when you eventually do find a place, you own it, you make it your own, and
Hmm.
it takes some sweat to get there. So it's personalized and subjective. You know, this isn't just true. No, no, this is true for me. You know,
Hmm.
and all of a sudden it demands a response on my part. You know,
Yeah.
and a responsibility. So there's a
Yeah.
long road, though. You know, there's a
You
long
can
road.
say I've done the reading, right? Like, before you were born into a tradition and there was no question of another tradition. It didn't even occur to you, right?
Right.
100 years ago or whatever it may be, it was really specific to the time and place that you were in. Now it's like we've taken that path of the postmodern, of the kind of multiplicity of traditions and religions that you can explore in a sense. So finding something that you can authentically, truly, root yourself in, I think is a little different, even though it's the same as prior to that, prior to having kind of a tradition that you were born into, so it's
Oh yeah.
interesting.
No, I have, people give, Charles Taylor, the big philosopher, wrote The Secular Age. They gave him a hard time because he says, like, our experience of Christianity and of religion is very different from even a couple hundred years ago. You know, people in a tradition will get all upset and say, no, 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 it's the exact same today, tomorrow. That's not true. A couple hundred years ago, it was literally almost impossible for you to be an atheist.
Hmm.
It would never occur to you. You ever see the documentaries that go into a primal village and they say, there's people who don't believe in God. That makes no sense to them. That's like saying people don't believe in the sky.
Hmm.
Of course, it's a living reality. But now, even if you believe in God, even if you're a Christian, there is a possibility that you're wrong. I mean, you have to live with it,
Hmm.
And it's absolutely, at least the possibility is open that, sure, there could be atheism. So this is a completely different subjective experience of religion,
Hmm.
People have to be mindful of that too. And also, when you have a million different religions, each one seems less and less likely, you
Hmm.
know. And I like Orthodoxy because it's grounded in tradition and physical rituals, and it's historically grounded, the story of Christ and everything. This is historical things that would happen, and we can actually measure it. So that kind of has the weight of time behind it,
Hmm.
and kind of test it. You can imbibe the spirit that sits in your body, And I read a lot, but those were all books. I mean,
Hmm.
even when I was into Buddhism, most of the time I was meditating by myself, and I mean,
Hmm.
no community, and it didn't. So there was no communion. I really wasn't communing with other people, and that was lacking too. It's the
Yeah.
postmodern thing. It's all up in our heads. We're not
Mm-hmm.
down here incarnated in practice. We think
Mm-hmm.
called religion and stuff in the sky, and it involves things that we believe. But back in the day, religion was something. It was kind of like a fish in the ocean. You breathed it, you walked in it, you lived in it. You didn't think about it at all because you know, you, know, you lived in it. It was your being practically.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah. No, for sure. For sure. And I had the similar experience now that you kind of articulated like that, or when I was a child, I went to church and it's like, my folks weren't really into it. And even the people at church and even the priests, like, I don't remember really anything that stood out to me that like of something serious or deep is happening here. Why do you think that's the case in most Christianity in the last 30 years, let's say?
well, yeah, I mean, the West, I think it's more than 30 years. I mean, to be honest, I think a lot has to do with, there's a book called The Church Impotent, and it
Hmm.
kind of goes into this way that priests have become more and more kind of effeminate and less serious, more permissive. Um, Not exactly, you want to say more womanly, but just less authoritative. And the reason is because a lot of these priests, they really don't believe what they're not living it. I mean, once you take away the aestheticism, the fasting, these things that anchor you to this religion, you're up in your head. And yeah, I mean, your words don't have weight. I mean, I've been around people when they speak, the words are like rocks and they lodge in my heart and they compel me. I feel this man has authority. These words are full. In psychoanalysis, we call this full speech. Because this person lived it, have experience. But once that vertical dimension is kind of flattened out, then these words are kind of theories and whatnot. And so, you know, the thing about the church impotent, you know, the way you get impotent is you don't persevere through trials. If you make the church very, very easy, you become effeminate. That doesn't mean womanly. You know, women can be effeminate too. Men, it's a technical term. It just means you lack perseverance. You know, so I do think that has a lot to do with, and also just you know, people have been rebelling against fatherhood and man. You know, the patriarchy and all that. But a lot of times it's with good reason, because once men sever themselves off from the community, then where did their authority come from? You know, their authority comes from themselves. No one's going to listen to you, you know, unless you're embedded in some larger community with their own rules. You yourself are sacrificing your life to its, you know, transcendent communal rules. Then, yeah, no one's going to listen to you. So,
you know. Yeah, that seems about right. And just get a little bit back into your past. So you mentioned psychoanalysis. So did you, where'd you go to high school at?
Oh, I just went to a New York high school, you know.
Upstate or in the city or?
No, it was just a suburban high school, you know. I mean, it's pretty large. I mean, I did read a great deal of psychoanalysis, and I myself did some counseling and for a while, and some, you know, as a therapist for a while. And you know, psychoanalysis and psychology, it's fascinating, you know, but it's the problem is it's missing an entire moral element, you know. And the truth is, I would see people, for instance, they would, you know, like sexual promiscuity, that really does make you mentally ill. I don't care who you are. If you sleep around with a lot of people, your personality, your identity does begin to disintegrate. How do you articulate that in psychoanalysis? You can't tell someone stop, you know, sleeping around, and you know, you can come up with a bunch of psycho jargon, but it's not going to make sense. And then secondly, you have to make a chaste lifestyle look beautiful, and so people will want to live that way, you know. I mean, they have to desire it. And you know, those are all shortcomings, you know. And nowadays, you know, therapy, I mean, it's mostly just to make people feel good, and you know, people are so lonely. It's just to have someone to talk to. It's almost like you're paying a friend at this point, you know.
So, and not a very good friend at that, you know, not someone that deeply cares for you, you know, someone that is like analyzing you coldly, you know, that's dispassionate but it detached at the same time, right? And is writing down literally. When I've been to many shrinks, and I'm very interested in my past in psychoanalysis, and
oh, really?
You know, when you're getting analyzed, you know, as the analyzand, you're there. And for me, it was, you know, waiting to get my script or whatever it is. And a lot of times it was 15-minute appointments. It wasn't really talk therapy at that point. It was more of a kind of psycho, you know, pharmacological intervention that I was looking for, in a sense. So you'd go there. And then I remember, like, I would, sometimes that stood out to me. I said that I was taking this medication, gabapentin, which is like a, you know, a Neurontin. It's another name for it. And I mentioned, I'm like, because I had like this underlying general anxiety that I had forever. And that seemed to work. And I'm like, you know, and I told him about it, and I forgot what it was. I'm like, yeah, stop biting my nails. And then he kind of writes it down, and I forgot exactly what it was, but like, he just automatically looking to pigeon me, hold me into some conceptual framework in order to, you know, justify him prescribing something. Like, I felt that, like, I'm like, that just doesn't, it doesn't seem right. And it never worked, like, you know. And then finding like the idea that, you know, love is what heals, right? Not airy fairy hippie love, but actual love heals. And that's why the whole Orthodox conception of a spiritual father, of someone that sits with you as a sinner, right? And with you takes on your sins, which is just your, you know, missing the mark, or, you know, whatever way you want to define that, it is truly healing, right? So the psychoanalytic approach isn't healing. And just to speak to your point, it's ironic because it's rooted in Freud, which is rooted in kind of psychosexual development and repressive sexual desire. Yet you can't tell someone, hey, maybe sleeping around like that is probably going to have a disintegrating effect on your personality, you know?
Right.
It's strange.
No, it's true. I've had the exact same experience. You know, I've gone to therapy and psychoanalysis myself, and half the time I felt like it was some scientist looking at a strange insect. I mean, Kierkegaard talks about this, how this is you're being objectified. You know, they're not looking at you like a human person. And I can tell you, I know some like really high level analysts who have a huge following, and they have the big books out, and they have all these theories. But at the end of the day, the people who follow them usually have no success with the theories. But at the end of the day, usually it's people because they actually do care. These therapists try, you're supposed to be objective. But even Freud said, at the end of the day, it's affected by love. That's really what it comes down to. And even the most successful therapists are usually, they have, they call it positive regard. It's basically just simple respect, but there's money involved, and and even as a therapist, what I hated was this person be telling me all these problems, and in theory, you have the answers. I'm the therapist. I have all the answers. That's complete bullshit. The way the technique works is you kind of act as the person's ego and you help them solve the problem, but it's not a communal thing. And the truth is, these people be suffering, and I'd be suffering with many of the same problems. I'm a human being. We're all disintegrating. We're all weak. We're all in this flesh of decay. I mean, we're all lonely. We all have these relationship issues, and what I hated was that it put me above them. How can you help someone when you're standing above them? And what I really liked about some other, like say the churches, like my priest makes it very clear that he's not above anyone, and he's on the same journey. He struggles with the same sins. So he's not, it's almost like he's almost like not helping me. It's almost like me and him are on the same journey together. He's not above me. Sometimes he's ahead of me on the path. I'm probably ahead of him on some things on the path. I don't know. We're all in this game, but it's kind of on that level, and my priest does sacrifice himself for me, even when he takes, he's a busy guy, he's got a job, but, he's taking a couple hours of his time, and I don't pay him, I put in, $20 a week in the little basket, he's not getting paid by me. So, I mean that, but also because of that, because he does that for me, I feel I'm responsible for whatever he tries to help me with. So, with the therapist, I paid him $150. I mean, if he tells me to do something, I don't have to do it. Who cares? It's not a relationship. I don't owe this guy anything. I think I owed him. I paid him in cash. With my priest, it's personal. If he asks me something and I decide to just screw it and go do my own thing, I've broken that relationship, and so with my priest, I'm learning to be human. There's no business transaction, I mean, so it is a completely different thing, and at the same time, though, it's all my responsibility. My priest could tell me whatever, and I could do whatever I want. It's up to me. He's never put pressure on me in my life. So, I mean, there's still that freedom, At the same time, though, there is a responsibility. Like when the church would help people, they say like, all right, we're going to help you, but you need to do X, Y, and Z. When the church run charities, now the government does it. And you can do whatever. I mean, you can still, go smoke crack. They're still going to help you. There's no, there's no personal aspect to it. It's all, it's all cold, and it's a business transaction. It's, you're treating people like machines. It's,
Yeah, this thread that kind of is coming out to me is in my conversations and in talking with you is this depersonalization that's happened, and like there's no community when you go to a therapist, right? You're actually very anonymous. You don't know any of the other people that are going to get therapy. It's not like, you're in church, you're going to, to confess. And then outside of that, you have a community of people that are like you, dealing with the same problems that you're communing in a sense. It seems that that's what's missing is this, this kind of dignity of human personhood, and then community. And then not to get on, into a political tangent, but it's like, that's why communism is such a powerful attractor to young people, because the idea that, you'll have community where things are redistributed based on people's means and their needs. And, we can finally overrun this evil capitalism. It's so attractive and so powerful, because people are thirsting and hungering for community. They don't get it in families anymore. Unfortunately, I don't think it's because of the inherent structures of family. I think it's because of the same depersonalization and secularization that, has its many interesting, innovations in terms of technological innovations. But then there's this whole personal side that has been effaced completely, and we're completely unaware that that's happened in a sense.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, if you look at communism, people sacrifice greatly. I mean, they work, 20 hours a day in the factory. And I mean, they industrialized Russia in 5 years. I mean, why would you sacrifice? You sacrifice it because of the man next to you. That's what you're doing it for your family. You're all in it together. You have a communal vision. So I mean, people just, that just say, well, Marxism is evil. You really do have to, like you said, you have to understand why someone would join that. Well, why is because, if you're, because, and also, you probably know, if you talk to Marxists, I have plenty of friends who are Marxists, they're usually kind of on the outside of society. Usually they've been rejected. Usually they're brilliant people, but society has said, we have no use for you, And so there's that resentment, of course. But the fact is, they've been kicked outside. And the old African saying, be careful of the boy you kick outside, because if he doesn't have warmth, he'll come back and burn down your village. And that's what these people want. They want warmth. And here's people saying, like, you don't have to be up here or down there. We're all on the same level. In Christianity, we do have that. There's a hierarchy, but we are all kind of equal in Christ, So it's a little different, it's not completely flattened. But communism and Marxism is and also, you probably know, in society, we've gone mad with inclusion to the point where there aren't even borders between what a man and a woman is, and we have to include everything, But the impulse behind that is very human. The colder, more atomized people get, the more furious will their need be to be included, And also, the more furious they'll see when anyone gets excluded, And so there's a reason that people go into communism, It's a very human impulse, the danger is it has to be put in proper perspective. I think Chesterton said, problem isn't that the world is immoral, it's too moral. In other words, there's a hierarchy of values, but it has to be put in a hierarchy. If you just take justice or egalitarianism and privilege that above everything else, and if you take it out of its metaphysical framework, it's going to be a catastrophe. And that's really what's happening. But the impulse is, yeah, absolutely. I mean, people want an identity that they belong to something greater than themselves. And communism does give you a great vision, and it's a future, and it's justice. I mean, there's a lot going for the vision of communism, I mean, that's the thing a lot of Christians don't understand is you have to give people a vision. It has to be something beautiful that they would desire and they would intend their lives toward, that they'll sacrifice themselves. Because, a lot of the young men, they're dying out there. They're sticking needles in their arms, drinking themselves to death. They wish to sacrifice themselves for a worthy cause. And that's what it's all about. Ideally, sacrifice yourself for your family and your work and whatnot. Well, a lot of these young guys, they don't really have a job for that. A lot of them don't have families. A lot of times, women are doing pretty well and they're working. They don't need anyone to sacrifice for them, But it's an opportunity, of course, because, you can sacrifice for God and the church. You can stand for something, And, instead you get guys playing video games. That's where they get their heroism from. But, but communism itself is a very heroic, vision, And I think that's absolutely true,
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, so where do people find community? Men find community now is in the military, right? Where you're going into the most, dangerous, chaotic environment that builds brotherhood. People that go into war together, they are brothers for life in a sense. And a lot of times they will choose to go back into the chaos rather than live this cold, depersonalized life back in civilian life. This question kind of came to me, like with all this idea of hyper inclusion, right? So the same system that is completely corrupt and is completely being critiqued is the same one that we're trying to include everyone in. So included into what? We need to include everybody. Okay. What do we need to include everybody into? What is it?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. It just kind of came to me like.
I know, but there is nothing. I mean, it's just kind of this amorphous, abstract idea of humanity. But humanity is abstraction. I mean, what exists are human beings, men, women, this, that, the other thing with all sorts of different histories. Humanity is an abstraction. And and they're trying to, and that is what, hyperliberalism is stripping people of all their identities, everything you can choose, until you become this kind of amorphous atomic unit that exists outside society, outside history, but I mean, that's the way you can include someone, you just cut off what's unique to this person. So they become more and more and more, you're able to include everyone into this one amorphous thing. I think that's actually going to get worse and worse, especially with transhumanism and everything. I mean, the other aspect is all that is going to be a reaction, and the reactionary take is going to be this kind of hyper tribalism. That's also a bad idea, you know.
Hmm.
You're kind of going to get like the Weimar Republic, but then you're also going to get Hitler, who comes in and tries to institute some borders, you know. I
Hmm.
mean, you know, I tend to look at it as kind of like you know, if you want to look at kind of like feminine and masculine poles of existence, and the masculine pole, if you would go too far that way, that politically could turn to fascism. That
Hmm.
becomes a strict hierarchy. It's completely vertical. This is your exact role in society, you know. And if you don't, unless you play the line, there's no place for you. There's no
Hmm.
place for any oddballs, you know. But the other side of that is, it becomes the feminine pole horizontally, and then becomes completely amorphous, and politically that becomes communism. And there's some Greek plays where women take over and they institute communism. It's written like 3,500 years ago. It's kind of funny, but and I think that's kind of where we are now. And forget about borders between countries. There's no borders between male and female. Everything's completely equalized, you know. And it seems to me like we're doing this dialectic back and forth, Weimar, Hitler, at small little levels. But we're unable to kind of to get any kind of correct idea of authority, that includes sacrifice. You were never able to get, on the left, you don't want any hierarchy. On the extreme right, you have this rigid hierarchy. There's no room for anyone, and what you want, a circle, and then you want to have a place on the edge for people that just don't fit in. You want a place
Hmm.
for them though,
Hmm.
somewhere in there. And it's true that I think we're spiraling more and more towards this. And also in the Bible, that kind of talks about how Leviathan and Behemoth is kind of on the right. He's the bull, and Leviathan is the creature of chaos and in the oceans. And I think we're moving towards that oceanic, kind of a motherly unconscious. Jordan Peterson probably call it devouring mother or something.
Devouring mother, yeah.
But I do think we're kind of moving towards there. And also, I think that's why a lot of young guys are going to Orthodoxy, because it does kind of still have a bit of a masculine pole. I mean, I can tell you, my priest is not macho. He's very sensitive. In fact, oftentimes he'll weep during sermons. But all that is included with the true masculinity. Not a young men are struggling with that and looking for something, and you get a lot of kind of bizarre hyper masculine machismos out there to compensate. But Orthodoxy, I think, does have a vision of inclusion and exclusion that works. I mean, I've had people come to our church that weren't Orthodox and get very upset when the priest wouldn't give them Eucharist. How dare you exclude me? So it's like, it's inclusive, but there are identity markers. You have to believe what we believe.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
I think there's a good balance there.
Yeah, this biological kind of analogy just came to mind of you have a cell, right? You have the center of the cell where the DNA is, right, the code of that cell, and then you have a border. And that cell, if it lets everything in, it dies, right? But if it lets nothing in, it dies. And there has to be a periphery, and there has to be a distinction made as to what is allowed to come in and out of that cell. Think about coronavirus, for an example, right? I think that's a great analogy that you can, like Peugeot talks about, it scales fractally at every level. Like we have the idea of borders, and it seems like this intractable problem. It's like, well, you don't want everybody coming in indiscriminately, because it will dilute the identity of the country, right? But if you have nobody coming in, there's no new vitality to come and revivify, the country. It's why America, I think, was unique and great in that it had this immigration program of importing people from across the globe, which is a wonderful idea. And we had a, at least ostensibly good experiment going on. But now it's like there's either closed borders or completely open borders. And both of those lead to kind of chaos and death of the identity, in a sense. It's really strange. And I don't know why it's hard to find a solution in the political, economic, or informational spaces that we're observing. So I've observed this kind of movement towards orthodoxy from people that you wouldn't think, from across the globe. And a lot of people that I've talked to, young men and women that are finding orthodoxy. In America, it's less than 1% of the population that is orthodox? Like how did you find orthodoxy 15 years ago? Like what led to that? What were you studying or involved in before? What did that look like?
Well, it's a long story, but basically I searched for a lot of different religions. Yeah, I'm actually a recovering addict and alcoholic. It's an exciting story, and I was homeless and
Hmm.
uh, lived that life, and eventually ended up into prison.
Hmm.
When I was in there, I was just devouring Stoic philosophy, and these were good words, and they did strengthen me, but they were still just words, and they didn't do much. And at a certain point, I realized that people told me this, like, you have run out of human solutions to your problem. I've tried psychoanalysis, I've tried therapy, I've tried different philosophies, I've tried different lifestyles, and at a certain point my human resources were completely empty. At that point, completely at the bottom, I had to reach out to a higher
Hmm.
power, you know
Hmm.
and I was around people. And this is another thing I learned about God is, I used to read about God, read about prayer, but I would never actually pray. I would never actually do anything. And I kind of learned that God is oftentimes more caught than taught. And if you just hang around people that believe in God and live that way, you kind of catch the spirit.
Hmm.
And so I saw people who got their lives around from following God, and I just hung around them. And I still really didn't believe in God, but I got down on my knees every day for about 2 years, asking if there's some spirit out there. Give me belief in you because I need it. I need God more than I need air, you know? And all my life I was looking for that, a spirit, some spirit of life, something true and real, something weighty, something I can lean on and live
Hmm.
inside. And eventually I just came to the belief in God. And I had this relationship, and I was praying, and it was kind of a personal relationship, but it was still very abstract, it wasn't very personal. And so I read a lot of different people, a lot of different philosophy, a lot of different religions. And I went back and revisited some. And, then I decided to get autobiographies of people, that are living in the 20th century. I got autobiography of Yogi, you got this, Rabbi of 84th Street. I read all these things. What did their lives look like? Forget about the theory, forget
Hmm.
about, you got an idea about God. I don't want to hear about your idea because you might be wrong, you might be right. I want to see your life. Let me see how your theory looks in fleshed. And I got a biography of Seraphim Rhodes.
Hmm.
And you're into Taoism, so of course he was, and he went through a similar journey to me, and he really kind of touched me. And after I read that, I started reading Orthodoxy. But the thing that really got to me were the Desert Fathers, but there was this spirit. It wasn't anything they said. They weren't, incredibly wise, nothing that blew my mind, nothing I really didn't know already. But it was kind of this spiritual odor that kind of just intoxicated me. And I just knew that these words were true, you
Hmm.
know. How do you live your life where you could speak these type of words, these living words? I mean, these words were really refreshing to me, and so I was so against Christianity. I couldn't believe I was even looking into it. But
Hmm.
eventually, after I read a great deal, I just became impressed, not with the theology. Yeah, I've read a lot of theology, and it is impressive. I thought it was a joke. I didn't even know Christianity had a theology. I didn't even know it had really real philosophy.
Hmm.
But it wasn't about that. It was the lives, people actually living it and incarnating the spirit. I mean, I didn't want to theorize it. I wanted to be able to point to someone and say, this is how I know it's true. You see that guy? He's living a transfigured existence. He speaks
Hmm.
with this incredible spirit. And so I sort of hung around like a lot of Orthodox people, and their lives impressed me. And then, I hit church. And boy, I went to church. I sent them back for 1 year, didn't speak to anyone. And that I experienced it, because I don't want to talk about God, In Orthodoxy, it's very incarnational. We smell God, we taste God, we eat God,
Hmm.
I mean, we do God, we perform God, we actually do these ritual performances that take us into the life of God, the triune life. We actually participate that, slowly, slowly. It's a, and if you're sensitive, you can almost feel yourself being translated into eternity. It takes a long time, to be many years, a lot of fasting, a lot of praying, but it is a transfiguring experience. And truly, the liturgy began to transform me. I went to liturgy. Liturgy was doing something to me. I mean, yeah, I said the prayers, I did this, I did that, but it's almost like God was, doing something with me. And that was like a very real, concrete experience. This is not a theory. I mean, I could talk about theories about God all the time. My theories might be wrong. I don't know, but I do have experiences, and I have absolute authority to talk about that. And that's what really, really kind of grabbed me. At the same time, I still love other religions. I don't wish to be I don't want to be a universalist or anything like that. But at the same time, I mean, my priest always says the Holy Spirit is working everywhere for everyone. God is everyone's God, and you can find a great deal of truth everywhere. And I see that. I mean, you've probably seen in Taoism. I mean, geez, I mean, the logos in Taoism, how is that not Christ? I mean, it's so obvious, I mean, if you personalize it, that's what the logos is. Yes, I mean, Lao Tzu must have experienced, not in a personal sense, but in another sense, I believe he did experience the logos. Because boy, that sounds a lot like Christianity from a different cultural standpoint to me. I mean, he didn't know Christ face to face. He didn't know the person of God. Okay, fine, but but you see this, and so I did see it working in my life. I mean, that's the thing about faith, is it's something you do. If I stopped going to church, I stopped living this lifestyle, I probably would stop believing in God. A lot of things, my belief in God actually came from stop drinking and drugging and living a certain way. The shape of your life naturally gives rise to your thoughts. And that's the thing, when we're committing rituals in the church, that's shaping how we think, the grammar of our thought, and also our desires, how we desire things, and also what we desire. And it's funny, I read the Psalms and they talk about the clouds and the sky, and they see Yahweh. And I've looked at the clouds in the sky, I've never seen God. But they say how? They say the way you do this is you actually shape your moral perceptions. You do that by being obedient. If you follow this way of life, your perceptions themselves become shaped, and you actually see the world a different way. And you can perceive God in the world. I've only had little glimpses here and there, of my life, but it's enough that's there, that just living a certain way, I naturally found myself believing in God. And I guarantee if I went back to a different lifestyle, naturally it would seem obvious to me that there's no God. It'd seem obvious to me that we just live in a nihilistic, empty world, because that's how I perceive things. Just how we have rituals in the church, they're secular rituals. I mean, Hegel talks about the man who reads the newspapers committing a ritual where he intends his mind towards a certain end, just as much as the man who wakes up with the name of God on his lips. They're both rituals, and they both will shape the way you see the world, and that's why it's so important to be incarnated in a community. So, I mean, it's kind of a long road, and I'm still exploring. I mean, I'm still looking to Orthodoxy. For me, though, it's a way of life and living experience. It's not about theology. I love theology. It's not about philosophy. It's not really what I believe. It's really about what I do, what I live, and am I living the triune life? Am I caught up in the life of God? Am I sharing the life of saints? Did I go from individual being to a more ecclesial way of being? It's hard. I mean, I fail all the time and I fall. I mean, that's where it's at. Even when I don't feel God, if I'm living in it, the church is kind of like it's a little ship. Actually, an Orthodox nun, I was telling an Orthodox nun that I was becoming Orthodox, and as when you first join, you're like, oh, this is great. My priest, he's like Jesus himself, and you're in La La Land. And she goes like, well, the Orthodox Church is supposed to be like the Ark, and the Ark, it's smelly, it's full of animals, and it's full of shit, but it saves you. I was like, you're in a nun curse. But she was right. I mean, the church is full of hypocrisy and, plenty of politicking and, bishops. And, I'm sure there's corruption higher up. And, I'm not there for some perfection. I am there to be saved from the dark spiritual forces in the world. Without that community, you are at the, it's another thing, I'm not a big Jungian, but, Jung did talk about how in the medieval time, alcohol was called spirits. Because, you know, if you're an alcoholic, the spirit, conscious spirit, you need a new spirit. When you're drinking, you're actually trying to get a spirit in you, a spirit of festivity or joy. And the alcoholic or addict is looking for a real living spirit. And Jung had no success with alcoholics. In fact, he told the one guy, he goes, listen, the only thing psychologists can do is point you to a religious community. And he would tell people, just go to a religious community. I don't know how it will happen. And maybe you'll just pick up and you'll have some religious experience, because that's usually the only way it happens. You know, psychologists are very poor. But what, you know, the other thing Jung, not a bit Jungy, but one of the things he was adamant about is, you know, diabolos, the devil, he divides. That's because when you're outside the community, you can get picked off by spiritual forces, you know, easily. And I know that when I'm not connected to anything bigger than myself, I can get very mentally ill. Very. That's, you know, talk to mentally ill people; they're all very isolated, you know. And so you do need a community around you. And you know, even in Russia, they have that old saying, like, the only thing a man can do by himself is die. That's it. You need a community to anything, you know, and you need to be protected. And those dark spiritual forces, you can call them psychological complexes or political manias if you wish, but they're out there. They will sweep you away unless you're embedded in a hierarchy that protects you from those winds of discord. That's the living reality, you know. And in fact, you know, I'll talk to a lot of psychologists. They'll say, you know, the opposite of addiction is not sobriety. The opposite of addiction is community. It's connection, you know, because they've done like tons of studies. You know, they give old people a bunch of like morphine because they're sick. Half of them get addicted, half of them don't. What's the difference? Well, the difference is the half that don't get addicted usually have family members. Usually they're service of the community. They found the ones that do get addicted usually very isolated. You know, so that's the problem. I mean, the problem really comes down to that. You know, I mean, because I do believe addiction, alcoholism, and even a great deal of mental illness is at the base spiritual. Of course, spiritual is biological too. I mean, you know, I take medication myself. You know, I need it. I don't know how I'd function without it. You know, but as Orthodox Christians, it's like, yeah, of course I know my body impacts my spirit. That's why I fast. That's why I do prostrations. That's why I do physical things. Of course, the body and the spirit are one in some sense. It's foolish to pretend otherwise, you know. So,
yeah, that was wonderful. That was very beautiful. Thank you for sharing that with me, man. I think that's going to resonate with a lot of people very much. There's so much there. So I battled addiction my entire young adult life, and it's like drugs work. That's the problem with them, right? They work, but it's like you're looking for community, and you find one taking drugs, especially alcohol, right? Because you are imbibing spirits, right? And it disinhibits you, right? So you are joining a community of, you know, evil spirits or psychological complexes, whatever you want to call it, right? Which are disintegrating and dividing by their very nature, in a sense, not by some metaphysical way, but just what happens into your life if you participate in that liturgy, right? You know, it's you talked about faith. You know, faith. Marshall McLuhan said, "Faith is a mode of perception." Right? Like,
that's great.
And I think that you can train and train yourself to observe miracles. Miracles happen, but if you're not your perception isn't trained on this part of the world, then you're not going to observe them, and they could be happening all around you. And I think that's the case. We were talking earlier about Elder Ephraim and some of the stories about the healings and other miracles that he did. And you were saying that it was not just the priests in the community, it was the lay people that were talking about these experiences with them. And it's like, and we're talking about, what do you do with information like that? Well, you know, again, it depends on your faith, and faith isn't just believing in something that with no evidence. Faith is a way of encountering the world, like of training yourself to observe the world a certain way. And I think that's powerful, man. The way that you just kind of brought that up. You talked about the lives of, the philosophers and whatnot. Just recently, probably in the last few years, I started looking into I'm into, I was into Nietzsche a lot, and the French postmodern Gilles Deleuze. And you look at like Hegel, Marx, and I started thinking, let me look at their lives, like their actual lives, instead of abstracting their philosophies from it. Right. And you look at Nietzsche went mad,
Yeah.
I think right when he grokked the Christian story, the Dionysus Christ dichotomy there, I think he went mad, right? My favorite philosopher, Jill Deleuze, died in the mid 90s. The best kind of interpretation was that he was grasping for air outside of his apartment in Paris, and then he fell to his death. The kind of general consensus that committed suicide.
Yeah,
Right. And he looked like Slavoj Žižek, who I appreciate his work very much. I've read many of his books, and he is holed up right now in Ljubljana, like with hyper tics and completely neurotic. Like, have you seen him?
Oh, yeah. Well, I love Zizek. I've read
too.
tons of his books, and he has a lot of good things to say about Christianity. I've gained great insight. But yeah, you're right. I mean, if you look at him, he talks about how being around his little daughter, I guess she's not so little anymore, but it creates great anxiety in him, and he gets panic attacks, and he can't even have a relationship with his own daughter. I mean, you're absolutely right. You look at the lives of philosophers; most of them don't have families. That's the first thing. So, and most of them don't have like strong relationships. They don't know much about love. And me, I love philosophy. One thing I found so strange was how little is written about love. If I ask about like, well, tell me about love and philosophy, people point me to Plato. I'm like, okay, well, what else? It's like, that's pretty much it. It's a little bit, there's desire, there's sexuality, but for the most part, love, really don't talk about it. But, you're right. I mean, how people live their lives will show you their philosophy. I mean, it's obviously, it colors the way, like you said, it entrains your perception, how you see things. And you see the reality that you live. I mean, the other thing about reality is I strongly believe it's personal. And that means if you want a relationship with reality, you have to be ready to give a response. You have to be responsible. You have to honor anything reality is going to tell you, just like a human being. I'm not going to tell you my secrets if I think you're going to make fun of me or if you're going to use it to stab me in the back, I mean, it's actually, you can have like a relationship with reality. Because of course, as a Christian, I believe that, God is personal, and so it makes sense. But even besides that, I think you can kind of experience this personal nature of reality, I mean, Deleuze, I love Deleuze. In my mind, outside religious metaphysics, he's probably the only person who came up with like a intelligent counter to that, I mean, such a brilliant person. But at the same time, his life was a great deal like his thought. I mean, he himself, used to inveigh against Platonism and whatnot, but he himself was very kind of alienated from his own body and from his own self. And I mean, he himself had a bit of kind of a schizophrenic. He didn't have like a solid. He himself had kind of this postmodern identity, and that came out in his philosophy.
I think it was Guattari's effect on him. I think that, like, he brought the Lacanian psychoanalytic. They did a great work together in A Thousand Plateaus, obviously. But, and the more that I think about it, and I had that same reaction with him. I don't know why, but probably from 2012 to 2000 and maybe 16, and still even like I read Deleuze, like I devoured it. I literally have a library, every one of his books. Like it just captured me for some reason. Like,
what about Deleuze? That's so strange. I've never met. I mean, yeah, it's funny when people say like, if you weren't religious, what metaphysics? I'd be like, well, metaphysics, I'd probably go into Deleuze because that's the only guy who really worked out a non-religious metaphysics. I mean, if there's no God, But what got you into Deleuze of all things?
I don't know. Like I just, at first I just, when I encountered him, the difficulty and the obscurant of the language, but once you crack it a little bit, then it's kind of easy. It's pretty, self-explanatory, because everything that is in his later philosophy, if you can crack difference in repetition, right, which holds kind of the Rosetta Stone, the Deleuzian Rosetta Stone to be able to grok the rest of his work. And what I've been coming to lately, probably the last year, was like, he enfolded the transcendent into his materialist metaphysics, because you can't have any idea of the transcendent or any kind of grand metaphysical structure, but it's there in his work. And I have this idea that he left breadcrumbs, for a future philosophy to find and kind of excavate the wonderful work that he was doing, like his idea of the the virtual and the actual. The virtual is a wonderful explication of, maybe the lower spiritual realm, in a sense. He's completing a cartography of the spiritual world, in a sense, of the material aspect of the spiritual world, and how the different different forces and different identities kind of actualize into the world. And he was talking about that, essentially, is how do identities form without being guaranteed by some transcendent big other, or whatever you want to call it. And he took pains he just used different words for the transcendent, and he folded it into his materialist metaphysics such where it's like, I don't see how people can be so not see that, in a sense, after reading it. I don't know if it's kind of a bias of mine, but he just claims that the different structures that lead to form in the world are inherent in those structures themselves.
Yeah, I actually agree with that. I mean, there's things that Christian can agree with, I mean, Platonic ideas are kind of on the inscape of things. They're not up there, I mean, that's very incarnational thinking, isn't it? I mean, doesn't that go right with Christianity? And also the way he kind of gets around dialectic is he has this very harmonic structure of logic. Well, I love that. I mean, God spoke the world into existence, and we can see everything as kind of a giant harmony. I mean, his, the way he kind of thinks about logic is, boy, it seems very harmonious with a triune God. Obviously, he didn't believe in that, but certainly it's rich for kind of Christian thinking. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. And I think the next couple of years, theologians should revisit his work, because there's a lot of people have. I mean, John Milbank has particularly taken the kind of like incarnational transcendent, like, transcendence not out there, it's here. It only can be. I mean, he talks about that. And David Bentley Hart even has a whole chapter on Deleuze and Beauty of the Infinite, where he kind of, gives his musical ontology and uses Deleuze and whatnot. So there are people out there using it, But like you said, he's so damn obscure, and he's so weird. I mean, he really is. I mean, I love breaking my brain on things like that, because then you have to put yourself back together around these bizarre concepts. And, Deleuze is a little like, he's kind of like the DMT of the philosophers, you know what I mean? Like, man, if you go in there, whew, you're going to come out changed, So, but, you still need a solid underpinning. I'm not expert in Deleuze as you are. I never immersed myself in it. But,
I wouldn't even say I'm an expert in him. It's weird when you read his work. I'd have this experience of this was before I refound Orthodoxy again. I was reading it, and then a few months later would go by, and then I would read it again, and I would it literally it would entrain your perception in a certain way, where it would it would reconfigures your way of thinking, in a sense that makes you kind of analyze and observe things in a very interesting and creative and novel way.
Well, I know, because it's very poetic, because he makes things strange, I mean, familiar things, and you see it from a perspective you've never seen it before.
Yeah.
The only other experience I've ever gotten like Deleuze is actually in Cormac McCarthy, like reading Blood Meridian, just kind of just change, there's power, and there's kind of a spirituality there. I still think, there's a lot of like weird, dangerous things in Deleuze. But, to me, Deleuze is just Nietzsche if Nietzsche had metaphysics, like Nietzsche decided, I'm going to be a philosopher now, like a real, metaphysical philosopher. If I'm just going to, like if someone wanted to put metaphysics to Nietzsche's spirit, let's say, want to incarnate Nietzsche's spirit into a certain type of logic, and that's what Deleuze would say. But I mean, I love Nietzsche too, and plenty of Christians do, because there is something Christian, very Christian in him, So.
Gerard said that he understood the Christian insight better than almost anybody at that time, like the way that he talked about it. And I think that's part of it, maybe what kind of made him go mad, because he was so anti-Christian in the idea of of values. His whole thing was kind of to reevaluation of values and to create your own values. But I think he realized that you can't do that, in a sense, and that might have kind of short-circuited his consciousness in a way.
I know he was too self-honest and kind of too brilliant. And yeah, Gerard even said, like, what you need to do is read Nietzsche, but against Nietzsche, because most of the things that Nietzsche wants to posit, his own philosophy works against, like all these things he's throwing at Christianity, you just pick up and throw right back at Nietzsche. You're like, well, what about you? Yeah, you could pretend you're not saying all these moral, you can pretend that there is no self, but you're positing a type of self, that's very culturally constituted. You could say there's no values, but certainly you're privileging this over that.
Mm-hmm.
You can't help it. That's the thing, that reality comes to us imbued with meaning. That's how we experience it. If you want, you could take an abstract philosophy and you can, kind of scoot reality away and say, no, that's just an illusion, and reality really is meaningless, and, and try to live that way. But you're gonna be trying to live in an abstraction, And Nietzsche, above all people, is like very abstracted. You have like no relationships. You read the guy, on women, and it's like, have you ever talked to a woman? The guy barely even had friends. The way he talked about human relationships is just absurd. I knew an existential psychologist who used to love Nietzsche, and he got a lot of his psychoanalysis from Nietzsche. And I kind of asked him, like, what about what Nietzsche says about women, about this, about that? And he's like, well, when it comes to anything relational, I completely ignore Nietzsche, because, relational, that's the blood of your philosophy. That's where you live it. And I really do believe Nietzsche tried to live it, and he found, he found what he was looking for, the Dionysian spirit, which is self-cannibalizing. There's the wine of Christ, which is a symbol that we come around in community and family. So the Dionysian wine, that's the kind of wine that leads to frenzied orgies and even real cannibalism back in the day in the rituals. There's two different types of wines. There's two different types of spirits. And he found the one he was looking for, I think most of his historical analysis is just plain false. There's a very romantic idea about the Greeks, this, that, the other thing. But and also the way he thought about, he thought the 19th century Lutheranism was Christianity. Go back years, and that's completely false. He just had no idea. But I love Nietzsche. I read him all the time.
Yeah.
He did have great power in his words.
And the way he wrote too, in his aphorisms, like it was like, I don't know if he called it philosophical dynamite. Like it's just so wonderful. Like it's so potent. And think about it. He wrote a book and he was intending to go beyond good and evil, right? So if the fall in Adam and Eve was because they obtained the knowledge of good and evil prematurely prior to their spiritual maturity, he was really working within that paradigm and saying, we need to get beyond good and evil. But he wasn't thinking of it in a spiritually mature, like he wasn't thinking of it in the appropriate sense, obviously, because he was, again, just eating from the tree again.
Yeah. Well, here he is. There's no values, but he's privileging the Overman. Clearly he thinks this is a good. Clearly he thinks he ought to be the Overman. Clearly he thinks, people should be this. Clearly he thinks the Superman is superior to the average man. He has a whole value system. He has his own morality. When people try to get out of Christian morality, what they end up doing is just flipping it upside down. Same thing with hierarchies. Communism tried to get rid of capitalism hierarchies. What did it do? It just reproduce them. Just flip them upside down. That's what's happening now. Like, rich people at the top, poor people at the bottom. Well, I'm just flipping around. No, rich people, they're the ones we should privilege in society. These people, that people, the outsiders should be at the top now. But the top guy should be at the bottom. You can't get out of hierarchy.
Yeah.
You simply can't get out of it. Just like you can't get out of morality. You're always putting something in some framework. And that's just but that's reality. One of the reasons I came to Christianity was, philosophically, you really can't get out of it. Even Charles Taylor, I mentioned earlier, someone asked him, like, are you Catholic? And he said, Catholic instead of what? Catholic, he's in the West. He's like, there is only Catholicism. What else can you be in the West? We're Orthodox. He kind of meant that we all swim in Christianity. We're all products of this culture. And he even had a big series of lectures called that, Catholic instead of what? He's like, Nietzsche tried to get Christianity, and he turned out to be fairly Christian in an inverted sense, but still within the framework. He never got out of the framework. He never got beyond good and evil. That's a problem. I know tons of atheists, and they inveigh against Christianity, yet they want to affirm all these Christian values.
Yeah. John Vervaeke, the cognitive scientist. Yeah. You familiar with him?
Yeah. I've seen some of his stuff with, he's been on Jonathan Pajot, and he's pretty good. I like how he's like so open,
Yeah. He was saying that he wants to start a religion that's not a religion. And he said in one of his discussions, he's like, he kind of mentioned this. He's like, is there a way to get out of the Christian worldview? Is there really a way to, like, we're always recapitulating it? Is there a way to get out of it? And his whole idea of a world, of a religion that's not a religion, it's like, that's what Christianity was, in a sense. Like, it was the religion that wasn't a religion, right? It was the truth dispersed and seated itself in various ways, the logos, right? Through, the Hebrews, the Native Americans, the Hindus, the Buddhists, the Taoists, I think, were the closest fidelity to the logos. But then the truth became man, right? It's like, if you wrestle with that, right? And the whole idea of what is truth then? If you try to talk with just a materialist and say that a truth is a person, it just seems absurd. What do you mean a truth is a person? It's when, your hypothesis matches the outcome from the experiment, and that matches the truth. And it's like, how would you try to articulate what truth is when, I don't know if you can do it without the experience, right? But how do you say truth is a person, or Jesus is the truth? How do you explain that to a materialist?
No, it's difficult, but I will say that you never know anything unless you love it. That's true even in mathematics. I mean that quite literally. Like, unless you love mathematics, you will not know its truths. You will not see its truths. You will not. You have to desire something to be true before you know it to be true. Because you'll reject it. You'll just absolutely reject it if it looks ugly. You don't want it to be true. So it makes sense that if we see this continuity between truth and love, we can only truly love persons. Right? I mean, you don't love mathematical abstractions. So, you're not going to sacrifice for mathematical abstraction. We're humans. We love other humans. And that's what we do. That's what our love is. So even the idea that we can know the truth, if you can know the truth, that means you desire it. That means you find it beautiful. That means you have some love for it. And the ultimate love is always intended toward a person. So to match truth with love is simply logical. I mean, to match truth of the person makes complete sense, because that is, as humans, the only thing we can love. We can't love big abstractions. We can't love philosophies. And anyone will tell you that. I mean that quite literally, though. The all knowledge, love comes prior ontologically to knowledge. You first have to love it before you know it. And that's, people, unfortunately, try to get it backwards. We want to know all about God, then maybe we'll love him. It doesn't work like that. You have to have a relationship for it. You just give little tokens. You don't have to go all in, so you don't have to go all in. You don't have to believe everything. Just give a little token of trust, a little bit, and he'll give you a little bit, and a little token of trust, But that trust is the first movement, towards something that's true, And he'll reveal it in a form of beauty. Beauty is what attracts us. Beauty is what we desire. You'll see something that's beautiful, beautiful way of life, people living beautifully, beautiful idea, beautiful vision. I think Christianity has the most beautiful vision. This God who loves us so much, he, sent his son down and, died for us. And like you said, in a war, I talked to an army guy, and I kind of asked him, like, you're out there, you're risking your life. Why do you do it? I mean, do you really believe in, I won't mention the war, but it's kind of a war I didn't agree with. And he goes, no, I don't. I do it for the man beside me. I wasn't doing it for the one. For a specific human being. That's why he was doing it for. I was like, yeah. I mean, why do I go to church? I go for Christ. I'm not going there for, whatever, pierogi sales or whatever. I mean, I'm going for a specific person. I want to have communion with this specific person. And, but also, our notion of truth is very different. I mean, that's, people misunderstand Kierkegaard, but, real truth is something that's true for you specifically. It has a hold on you and it demands a response. And the only thing that really has a hold to you and has a response is something human, and ultimately, this is where all morality comes from. All morality comes from the human face. When you're face to face, on Facebook, I can act terrible to people, but if those people are standing face to face, I'd probably be very polite and very kind. I mean, all ethics, Levinas talks about this. All comes from a face. So logically, it just makes sense that God himself would have a face. We have morality. We experience it. You can deny it all you want. You live your life as if there were some sort of objective morality. And if that's true, then ultimately the cosmos, the origin, has to have a face to it, Truth, morality, all comes together in the face of God, which we believe is Christ. But that's where that's what attracts us, you know. Even Lacan talks about the gaze, the gaze, the gaze changes you. When we look at icons, you know, we have people looking back at us. We're kind of looking through them into heaven. But there is a gaze that is transfiguring us, you know, that's transfiguring the way we see. And just like we said, training our perceptions. So the idea that truth is a person makes complete sense when you see that love is always a component of knowledge. And you don't even have to be Christian. That's very much in Platonism. That's in tons of philosophies. That's a lot of phenomenology. You know, just see how you know things. You can tell that love is always prior. You know, I mean, love always comes first. You know, your knowledge is always going towards some transcendent love because you want to know it. Why? You know, that's the thing. Any object, we can always know more about it. Our mind, our consciousness never rests on an object, then that's it. No, it can always know more. But what is pulling that knowledge? It's a desire. Why do you want to know more? Why do you want to know more about the person? I mean, biologically, you get food from them, I don't know, maybe money, whatever. Why are you constantly trying to learn more? Where's this for more knowledge? For what? The consciousness must be intended on a transcendent horizon because it's always going towards something. In theory, you can learn more and more. It never stops, you know? And it has to be intended, but the desire has to be intended within love. There has to be a personal love at the end of consciousness. That's the only way we could even know something. When you pick something out to eat, if you really phenomenologically dissect it, you'll see that ultimately there has to be an ultimate good that has to be personal. So to me, you know, Christ did make sense, but also it's something, you know, Christianity isn't something you explain, it's something you live. I mean, I lived it for a couple of years before I believed it, you know, to be honest. I mean, I was praying every day and every night for 2 years before I believed in God. You know, my life, the rhythms of your life, you know, and living a liturgical calendar slowly brings you into the life of Christ. You know, the rhythms of your life take on the continuity of the life of Christ, and you begin to realize that truth is something you live. It's not something that you can conceptualize, because a concept is something like a hand over an idea. You can grasp an idea. But if something's bigger than your consciousness, like God, you can't grasp it. You must approach it with an open hand. In that sense, the proper discourse to God would not be to know conceptually God, but to be able to form a relationship. And we do that through a discourse of praise and song. If you want to know your wife, what do? You write her poems. You sing little songs to her, you know, little love notes, you know. That's how you know a woman. Mm-hmm. You love her, you know. And if you want to know God, it's the exact same way. The proper discourse is never philosophy. It's always praise, it's always worship, you know, because you're not grasping God mm-hmm. that way. You know, it's open. And you're porous to this experience. Just like if you want to know your girl, you don't sit there and, you know, I don't know, like send her to the doctor to get, you know, biochemistry report. You know, you don't ask her questions either. You live with her, you know. Mm-hmm. I mean, you know, I used to talk about, you know, even if you want to know like a dog, you can kill a dog, you can get a scientific report on it, or you can know a dog experientially by living with the dog. And then you'll know all about dogs. Live with God. If you want to know God, you have to live with him. And that can be happening through the church. Also, just every time you have a gesture of love, you're participating in Christ's life and you're living with him. And he's living with your life. This can be humbling because my life was oftentimes hell. I've been in terrible depressions and this and that. And I realized Christ is not up there. He's right down here in my mm-hmm. hell with me, living with me. And that, to be honest, it hasn't provided that much comfort with me. But it is a humbling experience where I have to recognize that he sacrificed himself to live in this hell with me and, mm-hmm. and relationship with truth. You know, I mean, I can't stop believing in Christ. I just can't. He's just this living presence I wake up with and I go to sleep with, and he's there. I forget about him all the time, but there's always something there. You know? So yeah, that's my little.
Yeah, wonderful, man. We become what we behold, in a sense, no matter what that is. You know, and the whole fixation for the 20th century psychoanalytic type was desire. Everything came to it wasn't even what is desire, you know, it was what do we do with desire, you know, where does it come from and how do we power relations have manipulated it in a sense. And, if you choose to invest your desire in Christ, right, your life will lay itself out in a certain way, which will heal relationships and will, it's hard to describe it in a sense. But then, you don't really choose what you are interested in a lot of the times, like, where does that come from? You think? Like, I was into philosophy, but someone that might be into mathematics or engineering that just despises philosophy and whatnot. What do you think? There's a partial genetic aspect, physical aspect to it, and then there's a, I want to say spiritual, but what do you think that combination is that makes someone desire something rather than something else?
I don't know, but Heidegger talks about it, and he always talks about these things as a call. He talks about phenomenology, how we experience these things. It's not like, should I be interested in math or psychoanalysis? It's almost like, there's a call, and you feel, and this is the way I feel like when I read philosophy, it's like, it's almost an obligation. Like, I need to understand this. And sometimes I don't even want to, and I'm sitting there poring over books. It's like, why? Why am I reading this? Who is calling me to read this? This is a hard thing. But, there's that idea of inspiration in spirit, that there's a spirit that is, just how the ancients thought of genius. People weren't geniuses. No, they incarnated a spirit of genius that, that kind of motivated them towards something. So I do think there's kind of this calling. And basically, at the end of the road, every road is God. But, he's kind of, like a light hitting a fractal. We're pulled towards him in different ways. I could see the beauty in philosophy. Someone else might not. Someone else could see the beauty in, I don't know, flower arrangement or something. I don't know. But I believe all these things are different names of God. It's an aspect of beauty. And actually, when we die, I think we'll all see. Finance to me is very, very boring. I don't understand numbers at all. But there is some sort of masterly, consciousness to it, and people do find it desirous. And I'm sure there is an aspect of beauty that I'm just blind to. I imagine that someday I'll see it. But I think, who knows though? That's the thing. I really have no idea. Perhaps that, I think our personality is set kind of at a young age, and which way we're pulled probably has a lot to do with that.
Yeah.
But it's certainly mysterious. People try to say it's biochemical, it's this, it's that. To me, it's a deep, deep mystery, as most of life is. When you really look into it, very few answers. That's actually one of the reasons I liked Orthodoxy. I had a lot of hard questions. A lot of the answers I got were, well, we don't know. Might be this, might be that. Well, if you're talking about God and big spiritual things, most of your answers, if you're being honest, better be I don't know. You better be a big answer. If you're giving me hard answers for all these big mystical questions, you're probably bullshitting me. You're probably selling me something.
I think that's the root of ideology or idolatry, right? Like the first commandment is have no gods other, above me. It's like, unless you plug into the infinite mystery, which is a mystery, anything you invest your desire in is going to be limited and ultimately, disintegrating if you wholly, invest your desire in it. And your response there just made me think of the idea that, God created the world, but then created us to finish the creation, to help him co-complete the world, right? So it's like, God is love, right? If you can plug in and invest your love into God, right? And then that thing that shines forth to you that you're called to engage in, if you're doing it with love, with real unconditional love, that's what will create the kingdom of heaven in a sense, because you're co-participating, co-creating the world that God initially created. So it's like, if you can do that, but it's like that we've been, and I'm glad I talked with you because I was in a kind of weird headspace as I was reading Nick Land's. He wrote some. Have you read his philosophy about Bitcoin?
Yeah, that'll put you in a weird space. Just Nick Land.
In general. Yeah. So I was reading that, and I've been thinking about Bitcoin and AI a lot, and went down a rabbit hole. I've been doing that, various times for the last few years. I'll go through a couple of weeks of trying to understand Bitcoin, or really, and I'll get into it. I'm like, man, is this it seems like the Antichrist pattern, shines forth in all these technological, innovations that are, upon us now, whether it's transhumanism or or AI or Bitcoin, it's like these things are not made with love. These things are not encountered or being engendered with this love. And imagine if they were, in a sense. Is there a way to I don't know if you saw Jonathan Peugeot's conversation about Bitcoin just recently. He
Yeah,
released it.
yeah. What do you say?
Well, he was talking with someone. I'm not familiar with the person, and talking about Bitcoin, and he doesn't know a lot, and he's open to it. But the questions he was asking made me think. It's like, Bitcoin is being looked at as this kind of totalizing financial force that will encode trust in human behavior and transactions, right? So you no longer need a transcendent third party, whether it's a bank or anything else, to verify this mode of transaction. And it's like, yeah, but that seems like that has the kind of antichrist pattern or echo through it, if you think through it. But it's like not same thing with AI, right? Like I was watching Sam Harris was on Lex Friedman's podcast, 3 hour podcast. I'll listen to the whole thing, and I'm like, they started talking about love at the end, and whether or not AI can love, or whether AI will be able to so perfectly mimic human behaviors that it will essentially look like it's loving, in a sense. And I'm like, oh yeah, something about that. I guess the question is there. What are your thoughts? I guess a few more minutes here that you got. What are your thoughts on yeah, a few minutes, AI, Bitcoin, and these kind of technological hyper objects that are upon us?
Yeah, well, it's funny because in Japan they had these machines that look exactly like humans to welcome people in the airports, and people viscerally reacted in disgust with them, and it really freaked them out. So they had to make them all cartoonish and give them big eyes and everything, because we know there's something terribly wrong with that. I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, with cash, I'm at least handing a dollar bill, something solid in the real world, to a human being, so there's some sort of communion there. And John Milbank and these other guys kind of talk about we need to get back to a gift economy, because even Simone Weil talks about how in the economy, the material economy, there's a spiritual aspect to it. And how grace functions is when you give something with love, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in theory, a couple hundred years ago, if you go to the baker, the baker, and you're getting a cake, I mean, the baker's doing that to make a living, but he knows you personally, he probably knows your kids, he knows your family. So there is a personal aspect where this cake is also out of love. He knows you, there's some relational aspect to it. And so in that sense, it's graced, because
Mm-hmm.
that's how things phenomenologically become graced. They're given out of love, I mean, I could steal a wedding ring, what's that worth? But if I give it to someone, that actually can turn into a relationship. I mean, there is a phenomena that comes with gifting a ring to someone that can, a whole world can come out of that. And that's kind of spiritual grace. And so you're right, with Bitcoin, it becomes, this idea where it's not even tethered to gold, it's not tethered to anything. It's completely atomized, and it's against human relationships. So the funny thing is, half the people on Bitcoin, they don't even buy things with it, I mean, it's not even purchasing anything. And a lot of these Bitcoins, they have no utilitarian, and they're not supposed to. They're supposed to just, multiply like a virus, I mean, just out there in cyberspace. So, I mean, it is frightening, and I imagine that, I actually think it does make us, there's like an ontological diminishment with how we handle material goods, and how we place them around society, and the way we do that. So if you completely remove the human, then yeah, I think you're doing violence to yourself. I mean, this is like, the most monstrous incarnation of capitalism you can even imagine, where the goal is profit without any product. I mean, this is why usury was, so fought against by the church for so many years, because it's an unnatural birth. You have money, and money is multiplied, but you have no product.
There's no
So that's
value. Yeah.
no
Yeah.
value. So
Yeah.
I mean, this is quite literally satanic. I mean, it's the opposite of real birth, and that's a parody of life, isn't it? You're not birthing a product. There's no, you're just birthing more money, which is dead. I mean, I have to say, crypto seems to me like an abortion, really.
Hmm.
And I imagine things are going to get worse. But I mean, you're right. I mean, we're moving into transhumanism, which, and that's going to be where we use technology to improve ourselves. And believe me, people will be dying to change themselves. But then we're going to move on to dataism, which is where instead of us using machines, the machines will use us. Because society gets more and more complicated, we won't be able to make decisions about our society. There'll be too many moving parts. And Gorbachev, of all people, warned about this. He talks about how, there's going to come a time where things become so complicated that we need to run a million algorithms through the computer simply to make a decision. And frankly, we won't be smart enough to do that. It'll take too much time and it'll be too complicated. So the machines will make our decisions for us. The problem is the machines are making decisions not based on any kind of human logic. Society has to be human, and there's a human aspect, a warmth to it. There's a logic to the way we live and we relate to each other that's completely outside anything a mathematical, algorithm can conceive of. So this machine might start configuring reality in our society in ways that are completely alien to the way we think, how we relate to each other, how we think profit can be made. And, it very much seems like, technology is going to take us in that direction. And I mean, you're right. This is a pattern of the Antichrist. This is a pattern that we see in reality where dark forces can spiritually manifest themselves. And that's in a lot of different mythologies. I mean, you can find that everywhere. But this is like absolutely one of those things. And I fully expect it. I've read people, I've read Charles Schwab, and I've read, people like predicting like, well, it'll be the end of humanity by 2060. We won't have any humans. We'll be so enmeshed in machines that the idea that there's a machine, there's a biological human, will be completely foreign by that time. So it'll kind of be the same organism, and there'll be no such thing as simply a biological organism. I mean, and people are actually going for this. I mean, it really is frightening. I do see this coming, and I also see it's going to be really hard to resist. I mean, if someone told me there's an app that I can download into my brain where I can quote Bible verses, I'd think about that. I mean, I don't know. Should I do that? But like, it's not going to be clearly evil. Evil never presents itself as evil, but as something good. And usually evil is something good, but something we privilege to. We love wrongly. We love it in a disordered way. So I completely see that. And I see your economics being so divorced from a reality that we can't even make predictions anymore. Just complete chaos. And you see this, the feminine Leviathan, becoming an ocean. I mean, you kind of see this, in a way. I mean, Bitcoin, I mean, geez, I see people, with no value. I mean, there's millionaires who never did anything in their lives, people who lost tons of money too. It seems utter chaos. It seems indeed like an incarnation against the borders that keep our reality in place.
Yeah. Economy, the word economy, in Greek means family, ekonomia. Yeah, right. The root word of it is family, and we're divorcing any kind of, familiar relations to the economy. And, the same pattern, another pattern that seems to be coming up is the Tower of Babel, right? You try to do that, it's going to lead to, the scientists that don't believe in these superstitious ideas are telling us right now that, your human behavior is causing global warming. It's like your sins are causing the flood. It's right. Like, it's like, really, you don't see that you're saying that? Like they're literally the priests and priestesses that are summoning the demon and trying to build it a body. And, so God only knows what's going to happen. But I could talk to you for a lot longer, man. We definitely got to do this again. I actually have my son's flag football tournament today. We're going for the championship here in about 45 minutes. But nice. Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate your time, and I definitely want to talk again. There's so much that came up. We didn't talk about the artwork that you made me, and I shared it on the intro. You're a beautiful, wonderful artist, man, and I'd like to spend some time next time we chat talking about that. And then I'm going to link, your information in the description here so people can reach out. Cause I'm going to show the artwork that you created for me and some of your other ones, if you want to send it to me during the intro. Okay. It's really wonderful. It's special. You got a special eye. So I really think you should run with that if you're not.
Yeah, thank you, brother. Yeah, JonathanMcCormack.com is my art page. You can hit me up on Facebook. But anyone wants commissions, I draw all sorts of stuff. Starting at $65, I can do icons or it's nice little drawings. But thank you, I appreciate it, and
Yeah,
I
man.
enjoyed the conversation immensely. So thank you.
Yeah, we got to do it again, definitely, my brother. So, thanks, man. I'll probably post this, later tonight or tomorrow. I'll go ahead and send it to you, and I think that my subscribers will really appreciate what you shared with us, man. So, thank you very much. God bless.
Thank you, James. Pleasure.
Yeah, man. See you in a bit.
All right.